On a post about free lunch for all students, a woman said, "F them kids, not her responsibility." Later, she said, as a feminist, no one who consumes dairy can call themselves a feminist because they aren't. I assume because they think that humans and animals are equivalent, and therefore they think it's being anti-feminist against cows, dairy cows. But honestly, this is a hard subject for me, and I know that I talk about adult supremacy, aka childism, a lot, and the way that children in American society are dehumanized, denied basic rights, how it is a giant problem in this country, not only for folks who love to hate on any kind of marginalized group, but for a lot of progressives, a lot of people who otherwise call themselves feminists or leftists or progressive. There is a certain contingent, and I've talked about it, I think they tend to fall into two demographics, who openly hate on children. I mean, sadly, me talking about this cost me a mutual here in Portland who blocked me for being very vocal on this issue, and I will not stop talking about it because I have said on my main TikTok account and elsewhere that I think a lot of the reason we are here now in Trump's America, a lot of the reason our society has devolved into what it is now is because of the way we treat children. Those children who are dehumanized for 18 straight years grow up into adults who vote. Those children who are indoctrinated for 18 straight years, they grow up into adults who vote. Those children who are shamed, ridiculed, abused, made to feel small and less than for 18 years, they grow up into adults who vote. And I would argue that there is no way you can hate on children and be a feminist. The first account I ever blocked on TikTok was a millennial woman who loves to make rage bait about hating children, who makes it sound like it's her feminist, left-leaning, progressive, child-free position, power to women, women power, to hate on children. And as I've said before, I think that is a displacement of the very righteous, justifiable anger that women feel at the patriarchy for being all up in our reproductive business. It is that righteous anger that is displaced onto the most powerless and oppressed group. It's way easier to hate on kids they can't really fight back than it is to fight the patriarchy, to fight men. When you shit all over kids, they don't come back and commit violence against you like men do. Okay, let me get back to my point. When we hate on children, we cannot be feminist. Not only because 50% of children are girls, but so much of hating on kids is actually hating on mothers, either our own mothers or the fact that we resent that we had to become mothers, or we resent the fact that we are being pressured to become a mother. It is very trendy to shit on moms, to judge moms in public, not only because we dehumanize children and view them as the property of their parents, to be controlled by their parents, but because we get some kind of delight out of judging mothers who can never get, whatever moms do, it's going to be wrong. It's going to be wrong, subject to derision. We get off on hating on moms and kids in this society, which all ties back to the patriarchy. And let me give you an example of what I mean from my comments this morning, this person that I had to block. A woman was commenting that she takes her kids on airplanes and that she and her children have a right to travel public transit, which is basically what an airplane is, to visit friends and family overseas. And somebody replied to her, and I had to block them for saying, "It's not my responsibility to put up with your whiny brat because you couldn't keep a dude from shooting his load in you." Yeah, immediate block. That commenter, at least their profile indicated that they were a woman. Now, if you'll watch my content much at all, you know that I advocate for reproductive freedom for all people, that we should have the right to decide if we have children and how many children we have, what we do with our own body and our own reproductivity. The right to reproductive freedom and self-determination is also on the list of basic human rights delineated by the United Nations. So I am a big supporter of someone deciding to be child-free, advocating for their right to be child-free, and I speak out against people who shame women for choosing not to reproduce. Nobody should be forced to be a parent who doesn't want to be one. And so my next comment is not to ridicule all child-free people. There is a small contingent, like that woman, Hallie, that I blocked, that are child-free and make child-hating a significant portion of their personality and their content on social media, because it gets lots of clicks. But those women who are otherwise self-described feminists love to refer to people like me as breeders, refer to other women who reproduce as if we were livestock. It's one thing when a man calls a woman a breeder. It's reprehensible. It's horrible. I ended a long friendship with a man who was proudly child-free, and would refer to women who had children as breeders. Notice they never refer to men who have children as breeders. It's just women. And after taking a lot of time to educate him about why this was offensive to me, his friend with 4 children, and to all women, he still wouldn't change his mind. And I ended the friendship over it because clearly he didn't see me as fully human. So he was not a safe person to be friends with. But when I see women using that kind of terminology to refer to other women, and when I see women dehumanizing children, 50% of whom are girls, there is no feminism in their perspective. Aside from the group that loves to hate on kids because they are displacing their anger from the patriarchy onto children, punching down on kids because they can't fight back, and it's much easier than actually tackling the systems of oppression. The other group, I've said this before, that loves to hate on kids are the group of people that were very recently children, late teens, early 20s, who want to differentiate themselves from the class that they very recently belonged to. And the best way to let folks know you've arrived in adulthood and that you no longer should be subject to the oppression you experienced for the last 18 years is to turn around and play oppressor. Say, I am taking up the behavior of the oppressing class to indicate that I am no longer a part of the oppressed class. And I think for all of these groups, there's a lot of hatred of their own inner child. We have internalized so much all throughout our childhoods. We hear how kids are worthless, we're brats, we can't behave, we're a mess, we're an annoyance, we're an inconvenience. Our opinions don't matter, our perspective doesn't matter, our wants don't matter, that we have fewer rights for a reason. We've internalized all of that, and I think once we reach adulthood, we have a lot of shame and loathing because we've internalized all of these untrue messages for so many years. And I think that that all gets compounded by the fact that a lot of the negative messages we received were often from our own mothers and from other women in society who are also mothers, and how much that translates into us having a lot of hostility toward maternal figures. And so then hating on children, it's very easy to hate on the caregivers of children as well, who are overwhelmingly women, overwhelmingly mothers and grandmothers, because we've not unpacked all of this trauma around our own childhood and perhaps our own mothers. But what happens when you openly hate kids and want to deny children access in our society and want to dehumanize children is that you do the same thing to the caregivers of children, because children are dependent on their caregivers. And when you exclude children from public places, you are excluding their caregivers, who are overwhelmingly their mothers. And a lot of people are okay with that because really they kind of hate women, they kind of hate moms especially. And they project onto those mothers their own negative experiences with mom figures. And of course, that's compounded by, in general, misogyny in the culture. And there's no greater demonstration to society that you are a woman whose reproductivity our nation, our society wants to control than the evidence of your fecundity, aka children. So the minute you become a mom, you are now this symbol of like, oh, this is everything that we as the patriarchy want to control about women, everything that we as the capitalist system want to control about women, everything that our oligarchs like Elon Musk want to control about women. Here it is on full display. You've had sex, you've reproduced, you gestated and gave birth to a human being. So I realize like all of this is really interwoven, but I think there is no way to actually separate childism from misogyny because they're all tangled up together. The reason that we judge parents, especially mothers, has a lot to do with the patriarchy, has a lot to do with our own childhood trauma, has a lot to do with us hating kids. And a lot of the reasons that we hate kids has a lot to do with our childhood trauma, our negative feelings about mothers. It all ties in together. Which is why that saying, if your work for liberation does not include the liberation of children, it is incomplete. Why that is such a good saying. It's so true on so many levels. Hating kids is not cute and trendy. It's definitely not progressive. It's definitely not feminist. Children are whole human beings and valuable members of society. They are whole human beings.